Hi, this is Manu Bennett, and by Jupiter's cock, you're listening to Chris Gordon on Ramblings of a Hellblazer.
And today I'm absolutely honoured to bring Mr. Manu Bennett. Hey Manu, how are you? Yeah, thanks. It was
The Hellblazer Smurf.
yeah.
I never got that one. I collected Smurfs when I was a
Oh, did you?
kid.
Yeah, yeah, the
I never
Hellblazer
got
Smurf.
Hellblazer Smurf. Hellblazer Smurf would have been pretty cool. I
Yeah.
had Surfer Smurf and Papa Smurf and all that.
Oh, good, I had all them.
Hellblazer
Hellblazer one would have come with a trench coat with a cigarette hanging out his mouth. Yeah, it's from Constantine.
Smurf. Exactly,
Yeah.
brother.
Yeah. No, I started out doing the Constantine support for the TV show, so just called the podcast that, and it sort of spiraled on from bringing all those guys on board as well. So
And how do you know TJ Scott? That's how
interviewed
this
him.
all happened, eh? Yeah, TJ reached out to me and he said, "You got to do Hellblazer."
I know, I saw that as yeah, oh God, he directed an episode or two of Constantine. So obviously, when I was going through getting all the guys up and running, I was speaking to the cast members and obviously and crew as well. And I just got TJ on, and he mentioned that he was obviously directed Spartacus and stuff. And I was like, oh God, please! I said,
He directed my head getting cut off in Spartacus.
oh, did he?
But he saved me the gore. He made this incredible choice of having the reflection of my decapitation
Uh-huh.
reflected in Navia's eye.
Oh yeah,
And it was like one of the most magic moments, of all of my filming on the show. I mean, TJ is just such an incredible director.
yeah,
Incredible director. Yeah, when he came on the set on Spartacus, there was always these very elaborate kind of either the camera was on a dolly sort of tracking sideways, and we were doing these fight scenes continuously that would be kept within the camera because the camera was on tracks and so it would move alongside us. And so he really took advantage of making just incredible cinematic shots on our show. Yeah,
oh,
TJ, good on you, TJ.
yeah, he's fantastic. You see some of his photography that he does as well. It's just outstanding.
Yeah, yeah. He's got an eye for what's in the frame. That's the thing. And when you're working with directors, it's incredible how different directors can be.
Yeah,
It's like it's not like just cooking an omelet. You know what I mean? It's so specific to get images within a frame that you really know when sometimes you don't realize until after you've worked with a director, because sometimes directors can be seemingly ignorant, or and all the actors will be going around going, who is this guy, blah blah blah
yeah,
blah. But then when you see, no, I'm not talking about TJ. TJ is just wonderful with all of the cast. But it's like, these directors can really make a difference to
hmm
to the look of a show. Yeah, TJ is just fabulous. Have we done a TJ Scott promotion yet? TJ. He got me as well.
Cool. So that's it. I've got some questions for you anyway, just to run through, just general ones, and then some about the different roles you've done.
Well, then I better drink my coffee.
I know it's early in the morning for you over there in LA.
No, it's not. But I went and saw Creed last night.
All right, okay. What was that like?
Sylvester Stallone, and it was incredible to see his performance. Subtle, and just the irony of knowing that we all watched Rocky when we were kids, or, and then seeing this old man in the final scene, walking up the great Rocky steps,
Oh,
and instead of running up, he's
yeah,
walking.
he's
He
walking
can
up.
hardly make it, and he stops
Oh, bless.
2/3 of the way up, and he says, "I can't take another step." And the other guy goes, remember, the young Creed
Yeah.
character goes, "Just do what you told me, Rocky. One step at a time." And yeah, it's just the irony of life is so well performed by Sylvester Stallone.
Mhm.
It's fantastic that he's won the Golden Globe, and I hope he wins the Academy Award, because unless we see life in films, unless we see the portrayal of our humanity and our humility,
Yeah.
there's pointless. I'm personally, I don't like being an action fighting killing character
Mhm.
unless I possess a soul.
Yeah.
It's really one of my pet hates to think that I am lauded in some way for being
Mhm.
violent. I
Yeah.
don't like that. I think that that's the antithesis of what I try to be as an actor. And there's this it's incredible to watch the guy who sat there and taught every young kid on the planet to punch somebody in the face with Rocky Balboa.
Yeah. Yeah.
but the reason why his movie won the Academy Award all those years ago in 1975 was
Something like that, yeah.
because it was actually a story of a man with a heart and who struggled. And it's funny because last night I just sort of like, of course I'm much younger than Sylvester Stallone. I was just a kid watching him and been inspired him, but I saw a lot of parallels,
Mm-hmm.
and in terms of like, I'm now 46 years old, 3 kids, journeying down my track as an actor, but I realized the importance of actually being responsible in this art form to tell, these stories with depth.
Yeah.
Don't become a part of this this facade
Mm-hmm.
that is somehow impressed itself upon a world that buys things based upon labels.
Cool.
Mm.
That is fair. I've got to say, I've not seen the movie yet, but I can't wait to watch it. It does, especially that Rocky series, because the whole series, you're right, it shows the life of him going all the way through. There's different stages of life as we get older. It is. I can't wait to see that because, especially the way you've just described it, sounds great.
Yeah. There's some wonderful reflections as well that make you go like, oh, really? Really?
Awesome. That kind of leads me right into my first question I've got for you, which I've got listed, is what actually inspired you, or who inspired you to become an actor and get into acting in the first place?
I think it was just the art, the process of the art. When I was like 15 years old, I lost my mother and brother consecutively 2 weeks apart from separate car accidents.
Oh God.
And I had to deal with emotions. And that's all art is. Art is emotions. It's when you become an artist, you make a commitment to put your paint on the canvas, or to put your soul into an instrument, or to put your heart and soul into a character.
Yeah.
Uh, and I started off with dancing, and I found that was a way of, I'd lost my mother, and so this missing identity to a female figure in my life, I guess got a little bit cured by me doing ballet, and I
Right.
danced with, dancing pas de deux work with a female ballerina, being able to listen to this soft music and hold this female energy, that I so desperately missed,
Yeah.
but dancing for me, kind of, I don't know. I was sort of an outdoors person, so
Mm-hmm.
somehow the containment within a studio, uh, it somehow just clicked, and it wasn't my thing, And
Yeah.
I can't say that I don't regret not having taken up potentially a scholarship that I could have done in New York to become a real professional ballet dancer, And when I look at Barishnikov and Nureyev and all these boys, and I think about the incredible strength that these men
Yeah.
have throughout their lives, and they maintain these incredible fit bodies. Oh, the fittest I ever was when I was a ballet dancer,
It's
because
like core body strength, isn't it? It's all core and all.
you have to be thinking about the way your toe is at the same time that you're thinking about the way your hand is, and
Yeah.
lifting a woman's weight around as though it's a feather, and leaping, and there's just incredible extension, and the
Mm-hmm.
muscles are used to their absolute perfection. Uh, but that was just not for me. I then took a trip to America, and my uncle, he my mother was immigrated to Australia with her parents at the end of the Second World War, and they were very poor. My grandfather was Scottish, my grandmother a mix between Spanish Jewish
Right.
and English, and they lived in a chicken coop.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, you moved to Australia to get a job, and
Yeah.
they got on a horse and cart or something and ended up in the middle of the country in Australia. And the address that they were sent to find their job and
Yeah.
their accommodation didn't even exist out in the middle of country rural Australia.
Oh yeah.
And so my grandfather had to go to this local farmer who said, look, you can work for just a place to stay, but you have to stay in the chicken coop. So my
God.
uncle and my mother and my auntie and my grandparents lived in a chicken coop.
Wow.
I mean, unbelievable. Anyway, but my uncle became a classical piano player, and then he aspired to jazz, and he
Mhm.
became very good at it. I guess he had a lot of reasons and motivations to escape the chicken
Yeah.
coop. and he ended up coming to America, and he became a very well-known jazz piano player around the Marina del Rey area of America, and
Mhm.
back in the time when it was very, very cool. Hugh Hefner hired him to introduce beautiful women because he was always there's
Awesome.
all the stories. And but basically he ended up sort of playing for Elvis even, he
Yeah.
and when I came to America when I was 19 and I was dealing with all these emotions, I met my uncle, and I saw that he'd gone to these heights that I'd never seen another man go to, and he automatically became a mentor of mine. Um, it was funny because I wrote a dream. I wrote a song on the piano at the time. I was playing music as well, and I wrote a song called "The Hollywood Dream."
Yeah.
And my uncle loved that song, and so he always supported me as a young artist. But the Hollywood Dream song was actually about James Dean and Marilyn Monroe, and it was quite haunting,
Uh,
and it's funny because it sort of reminded me of a poem that I wrote when I was about 14 at school that kind of had this line in it that was I wake to a shadow, beating clock, ticking the footsteps of commuters or something. It kind of was, and I step into this thing with a sense of non-recognition, a reminder of my disposition.
mhm.
And I didn't even know what this was when I was 14, writing this poem. And I think sometimes things in life, they come at you like the Indians go into dream caves, and they go
Yeah.
in, or they go into sweat lodges, and they have vision, right? And I think at a young age, I kind of almost had this kind of prophecy in some of my dreams and stuff about stepping into this life later.
All right.
And having become an actor, one thing is that you're doing something that kind of doesn't relate at all to the normal working world. And you travel around to wherever the job takes you,
True.
and
Yeah.
it's a very, very interesting kind of career. um and having wrote the Hollywood Dream song with my uncle, it was kind of prophetic to the kind of the scenarios that this town ain't pretty, man. Like, I'm here right now, I'm in
Yeah.
LA, and there's a lot of broken hearts, and there's a lot of dreams, and there's a lot of this idea that becoming an actor and becoming a success in this town is like this ultimate reward and everything. But the pressures are very intense.
Oh yeah, I can
The
imagine.
pressures on young people here, I've never seen a bigger bunch of confused people in my life, than in this town.
Yeah.
And so, you've got to stay really, really grounded, and stay close to the people you love,
Mhm.
and don't think it's about you,
Yeah.
because the moment that you do, it can be quite overshadowing in this town. So
Right.
yeah. But I've just been up with my uncle
Uh-huh.
in Santa Barbara, and he's just had a stroke.
Oh no. Sorry to hear that.
Know? And again, this huge revelation, like the Rocky movie,
Mm.
like, I remember my uncle when I met him when I was 19 years old. He was the coolest man on the planet, and he'd
Yeah.
played for Elvis, and he was, all these things, and he still is all those things.
Yeah.
But now he kind of banters at me like this, and Manu, do this, do that, and he's kind of had this, but he's had this stroke, and so there's we only have so long to enjoy this life,
Yeah.
and to be good to those we love, so and the Hollywood thing is just a fleeting idea.
Cool. Nice one. He's talking about the jazz thing, if you see right behind me there.
Oh, brother, you are a hellblazer.
Yeah, it's not mine. It's my dad's. Yeah, my dad. My
That
dad.
is yours. That
Well,
is
it was
yours.
mine now. Yeah, my dad
It
passed.
is your father.
Yeah, I lost my dad in 2009. But one of the things he used to do, he was a minister. Sorry, not bringing this about me, but yeah, he was a minister, and one
No,
of
you
his
talk about
pastimes, he was a drummer as well. He was a semi-pro drummer. He could have made it pro in America, but he chose the ministry. But he carried on drumming in the evenings. But he's played at Ronnie Scott's. He played at the Footlights in Cambridge with Stephen Fry. Hugh Laurie were there. He's done, he did all of that. And what he did, he left the drum kit for my son. So making sure my son knows how to play drums as well, because my dad was a jazz drummer. He absolutely
brother.
adored jazz.
Brother, that is unbelievable. You and I have a lot in common there. Okay, a lot. My father had a #1 song in New Zealand, but my mother was Seventh-day Adventist, and so
All
my
right.
dad gave up his musical career to become a preacher at the church, or to study to become a minister.
Seriously. Wow.
And yeah. So he sort of left music behind, and it never really became the legacy that he could have made it. I'm not saying between religion and art there is that sort of but he joined a church that was very adamant that ego was not to get in your way, and so the arts and certain things were just frowned upon.
All right.
And he later in his life he came to regret certain decisions about not allowing his art to be front and center of his life.
Yeah.
And when my mother passed away, she left a piano.
Hmm.
My mother was a very, very good piano player. Like my uncle, she was
Yeah.
training as a child as well, so she was a competent. I think she did all of her grades, and so she could play anything, any classical music. But when she passed away, her piano was left sitting in our house like a tombstone.
Right.
And I lifted up the lid of the piano, and the first song that I played, I just played by ear. I just wanted to learn to play something on
Yeah.
her piano, and so the song at the time was "Endless Love" by Lionel Richie,
Right.
because I just wanted to play this song to my mother. And
Yeah.
so "Endless Love" was kind of like this theme that I wanted to connect with her.
Uh-huh.
And the strange thing was, is when I did Spartacus, when we did our first premiere in Los Angeles, after the premiere, like I think the next day, I went to a diner here in Los Angeles, and Lionel Richie was there.
Whoa.
And I walked up to him and I said, "Listen, mate, I got to tell you, Mr. Richie, I think I first became an artist, started expressing my soul when I lifted up my mother's piano after she passed away. She just died, and the piano was there like a tombstone. I lifted up the piano, and I didn't lift up the piano. I lifted up the
Yeah.
lid of the piano, and I played "Endless Love," and that was my entry. That was how the door opened to art for me.
Right.
And Lionel Richie was like, "Oh, son, come sit down." And he introduced me to his family, and we had this good old chat. We had this great chat, and then he got the phone number of the girl I was the wave continues, that emotional spiritual wave that your dad found in drum kit. What was his father a drummer?
No, his father was actually an English teacher, but during the war he served with, you remember David Niven? He was actually served with David Niven in World War II in a secret signals regiment like the SAS. But that's the background he came from. He was very, very reserved.
Reading codes and stuff like that,
yeah, and going behind enemy lines and setting all the communication channels up, and before the actual Allied advance came in and stuff like that. It's still secret, half of it. We can't find out much about it, but what I do know, it's just that he sort of went like our recce patrols now, those kind of things, and what the US Marines do. They go out in advance and set things up. It was kind of the predator to all of that. But he was a very reserved, very quiet man. He wasn't anything to do with
except when he got on the drums.
That was my granddad. My dad himself. Yeah, my dad himself was a very outgoing. He actually included, when you were talking about your dad there with the drum kit, my dad found a way to bring the drums into his sermons. So every now and then he'd bring his drum kit in, and he'd have all the kids come up and take a drum each, and he'd work a way out to bring that into his sermon, and how he would actually talk about humanity and sharing. It was a brilliant way to do it. So yeah, and like you say, the spirit lives on. My son connects to I think he connects to my dad through the drums as well.
I think when religion allows us to embody our own expression more, like I've been to an African American Methodist church here in Los Angeles, and the way that they sing and the way that they embrace it with their own energy, is quite incredible. Rather than just going and sitting in a church and kind of like that feeling of overbearing weight.
Yeah, it's like claustrophobic, isn't it? Yeah.
Not judging anybody's choices, but I find that inspirational.
No, but yeah, no, that's what he was like. He took it in, so I was quite
good on.
Yeah, quite happy that my son's decided to take that up. Cool. Awesome. Yeah, I shall move on to another question.
So now let's talk about Azog.
We're still talking, still a bit about Crixus at the moment. Obviously, I've read somewhere recently, I think it was very recently actually, that you train hard, and when you come onto set, for example, for the battle scenes, because you want to make sure that when you're on set, you want to convey that much emotion and that much power, and you want to make it look as real as possible. What kind
Yeah.
of skills did you have to learn to be Crixus? And did you have to go to like I think, bear with me a second, I'll find out the name. Fiona Simpson,
Gladiator.
a boot camp, a gladiator boot camp.
Yeah. Yeah. We all did that, and it was a really smart decision to get everybody who was going to basically be fighting in the arenas, together 6 weeks before we started shooting,
Yeah.
because there's nothing worse than not having a close connection to the material.
Mhm.
That's, I mean, it's so important to know the details, to know the underlying currents,
Yeah.
and I mean, physicality, is having been a dancer, is such
Mhm.
an important part of expression.
Yeah.
And some actors just don't factor that into their performances. They think it's just talking heads.
Mhm.
So they'll come on, and I'll see that, in a sweaty scene or a scene where they're meant to be physically tired, but
Yeah.
they won't do anything. I'll see these young actors just chit chatting, and then they'll come onto the camera and they'll go, "Oh yes," and then they're coming now, and and this breath is like just such an act that I
Yeah.
just can't believe that these guys actually think they can get away with that.
Right.
And look, again, not to judge, but
Mhm.
I don't like that. I guess I am judging it. But like having done boot camp and stuff like that prior to going on to filming, we all suddenly realized these layers of physical and mental exhaustion and energy, and the shapes that we need to make when we're doing the fight sequences. We constantly went through, sometimes on camera, you sort of want to have exaggeration on certain things, to emphasize, a blow of the sword, and the only way to know these forms, just like dancing, is to do them again and again. So
Yeah.
we would do sword training for a couple of hours and get all of our numbers down, cutting down through angles, cutting through the middle, stabbing, going up and down,
Mhm.
all of these dance moves or physical moves we would rehearse over and over, so that when we got to the actual moment of being in front of that little rectangle that has to show the world that we giving them
Yeah.
this time in history, would be as physically as good as as the written material in its acting. And it was really my intent to embody Crixus, in a way that I guess some individual man so many years ago, who got given this name because he had curly hair, because that's what Crixus means. It means the man with the
Right.
curly hair. That's why in the prequel we tried with the long hair, we tried to
Oh
get a
yeah.
bit of wave in it.
Mhm.
Yeah, because in the first season I had very short hair, and I
Yeah.
was,
Pretty sure.
Crixus means curly hair. And I'm like, yeah, but we want. My producer was like, Manu, you're going to be like a marine. I was like, really? Okay, okay. But yeah. I mean, look, just I think Spartacus won its audience because, one, it was relentlessly dramatic
Mhm.
through the great writing of Stephen DeKnight. It was visually, something not totally new, because 300 came out and people likened us to 300, but it was definitely, a big shift for television to receive this kind of visual. And in its own way, it had nothing to do with 300, and it was completely its own animal.
Yeah.
Um, you know, uh, but then it really just came down to how much you felt about the struggle of these characters.
Mhm.
And I actually based Crixus and Spartacus's relationship, from my perspective, upon a guy that I went to school with, who I detested. I mean,
Right.
he once wrote on the board in one of our classrooms, and I walked in and people were laughing, and he wrote like, Bennett is the N word,
Right.
a GGER,
Mm.
and me and this guy hated each other. I mean,
Yeah.
I was a break dancer and wore gel in my hair
Right.
and had kind of like a metrosexual kind of I liked fashion,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like I kind of looked after myself,
Mhm.
whereas this guy had like the side of his hair all shaved off with a mullet, and kind of drove around in this heavy car,
Yeah.
and he was what we called a Westie,
Right.
and I kind of was polar opposites with him, like two different dogs that look at each other and growl because they just don't get each other's instinct.
Mhm.
And after my mother died in the car accident that I was in, and I was involved in as well, a lot of people ask about these scars. These scars were actually from going out the window
Oh,
We got
God.
hit by a drunk driver and our car spun into the air. Unfortunately, it hit my mother's side.
Oh,
Both when we got hit by the car, and then it went into a telegraph pole. And so that's how my mother was killed. But as it
hell.
spun through the air, I was thrown sideways out the window.
Yeah.
And so that was the glass as I went flying out the window. And that was where I hit the road with my head. And there was still tar pigment in that scar. That's why it remained kind of dark.
Yeah. Bloody
Um,
hell.
and I was in intensive care in hospital and didn't come out of a coma and unconsciousness for almost a week and a bit. And then when I woke up in my hospital room,
Mm-hmm.
um, my father was there, and then suddenly in walks Matthew Sisley, my worst enemy,
Yeah.
and I was lying there with my eye closed, like, and, barely alive. And I'm looking up, and here's this guy who referred to me as the N word, and would want to fight me any given day.
Yeah.
And he was standing there looking at me with like this emotional remorse on his face, came up, put his hand on my shoulder, and kind of, I'm sorry, and at that moment I realized that nothing is what you think it is in terms of judgment of people.
Yeah.
I mean, in today's world, the us versus the terrorists or whatever, until you put your hand on somebody's shoulder and you understand who they are down deep inside and what has created this idea that you think is a monster,
Mm-hmm.
then you have no idea what emotion is, and you're neglecting the opportunity to have that emotional connection.
Yeah.
Now, when I knew that about Matthew and we became best friends and I was the best man at his wedding, when I realized that leap could be made between two such contrasting characters, that was my complete aim in the Crixus storyline, to bring Crixus from the place I played him. I played him initially as the person that I wanted the audience to hate,
Yeah.
because I wanted their hate to turn to love, and I wanted them not to be able to understand it,
Mm-hmm.
but to only understand it through that emotional realization that beneath the layers there lies a man, and a man with a heart, and a child with a mother and a father, and a whole history of his own.
Yeah.
That all of a sudden people would go like, you know what, I was wrong
Mm-hmm.
about that person. And and I think I'm proud. I'm proud to say that through my loss and my pain and my sorrow and these situations that happen in my life, I'll have the opportunity to share that story,
Mm-hmm.
albeit through acting.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that's actually stolen the question, because I can revert back to when you said you like to play characters with soul, not just obviously be seen as the hard man. And Crixus was one of the. What you've just described is exactly how I felt, and I'm sure every other person felt. You started off absolutely hating the guy. He's like, who the hell does he think he is? Blah blah. Having to go at Spartacus like this. But throughout the series, I'd question myself and go, am I supposed to be liking him? This guy's actually. There's much more to him than just the big,
Oh, my
and
producer came up to me three episodes in to the first season. My producer came up to me. He goes, Manu, what are you doing? We don't like your character, and you have to start a love story with you the next episode.
yeah,
You're meeting this slave girl Navia, and you have to have a love story, and nobody's going to even watch it. They're not going to like it because everyone hates you. I was like, bear with me, please,
yeah,
please, Robert, just bear with me. Honestly, I know what I'm doing here. It's something I've experienced. Please let me go with it.
yeah,
It wasn't the archetypal kind of idea of the hero, you
mm,
know, but great, like it's two-dimensional sometimes, out of the Americanization of a hero, in some stories, where it's you only do good and you only
yeah,
do right, and this sort of stuff. No, you got to pull that apart. We're all filled with mistakes. We're all filled with, lesser versions of ourselves than we portray on the outside, and
mm-hmm,
it's so important to give people that hope, to know that in our general storytelling, heroes aren't that, because, that's when you start getting people who think they look like the hero and think they are the hero because of
yeah,
those qualities, and the people who are maybe what you might call on a different angle of the food chain, or a different idea of the fashion system, or the different idea of the cultural look, the color of their skin, whatever. these people start being disadvantaged by that ridiculous idea that that's what makes a hero.
Yeah. No, it's cool. And yeah, I'll probably speak for everyone to say that the actual personification of that was brilliant. And I say that love story between you and the Slayer, it was just, that was when it really hit, and you're just like, oh my god, he's actually, he's a sweet guy. The whole world's just been against him. It was really brilliant, brilliantly done. I can't put it into words like you can.
Yeah, look, I had to keep on playing the layers, the mistakes, the problematic scenarios. I mean, at the end, Navia was hell bent. She couldn't get out of her psychological damage, and it was like she had to do Crixus's journey
Yeah.
before, she needed to hold that sword now and to strike out and to let out her anger,
Mhm.
and Crixus tried to prevent her from doing that. And this is the way the story wanted to go, and in reality as well, in the historic story, Crixus also wanted to go back and take on the Romans because he thought it was a force that needed to be stopped at the time, and so there's all these layers of unfortunate
Yeah.
anger and conflict that had to still progress even when we'd won the audience over,
Yeah.
you know, and that ended up with that moment, and that's the irony of that moment because in their want to continue battling, they even lost their opportunity to love, and that was quite poignant.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Definitely. Last one I've
Don't
got.
lose that opportunity, people out there. Love, love.
That's what makes the world go around. Were you able to have you? Again, I saw recently you've tagged yourself in a picture which you said was your favourite photo, where you suggested, yeah, I've been paying attention to your Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
No, where you said it was you suggested to the director it's the victorious slice and raw. Was that quite a common theme? I mean, obviously we talked about TJ, and I guess where you could actually suggest things to the directors to sort of see how your character would go and put that kind of
You,
suggestion
you
and
know,
take it the way you wanted it to go.
sometimes you take for granted that you can suggest things, and like all relationships, I think you can only really suggest things to people, especially in a chain of command, like an acting, environment is. We've got
Hmm.
directors and producers and whatnot. I'm always vocal about how I feel about something. I think if I prevent myself from making commentary on that, then somehow I'll just turn into somebody like a talking head.
Right.
And so I try to contribute. Sometimes I mean on my most current series, Shannara, I've had
Yep.
an incredible relationship with Al Goff and Miles, the two producers, and each of the directors that have come onto the show. You have a varying relationship with in terms of how much you can contribute, and
Yep.
but the producers literally gave me a fairly open slate to create Al-Anon.
Right.
We just I think they just trusted what they were seeing on rushes,
Yeah.
and they said, "Manu, just do what you do, just do what you do," and that was it was a very humbling experience to find that that's possible,
Yeah.
in this industry. Because I mean, look, it's true. At the end of the day, studio heads, directors, everyone gets together in this room a long way from the studio and makes hard decisions about what the script is meant to say and things like this.
Yeah.
And so, it's no small thing to say, listen, I believe my character would do it like this. And those words sound a little bit cliche.
Mhm.
Can we potentially do this? And usually you end up shooting it the way it's written, and then you give it another go in a slightly different way. And
Right.
whatever is best when it goes into that editing room, the director will choose
Okay.
for the good of the show. You know, uh, I almost sort of feel like a naughty boy as I mention this, because I'm kind of like, I know my place, but I can't shut up if I actually think that something is poignantly necessary in a
Mhm.
moment. Uh, I
Okay.
just hear it like a note. I hear it like a flat note on a piano, or I feel it like an incorrect position in dancing when I'm
Mhm.
behind that camera, and I feel that vibration go through the scene in that moment.
Yeah.
And I'll usually just say, listen, I just think this moment, can we discuss it, and look, when you have an open channel with anybody,
Mm-hmm.
you can usually have a good conversation and you'll resolve whatever. You know, whether they explain to you why they want it or whether you explain what you think. If there's a really open channel,
Yeah.
these things will just happen, and it's beautiful when they happen. I remember, again, going back to Spartacus, you know, Rob Tappert came down to me after we filmed the fight with Octus. But I filmed, you know, Crixus's first victory in the arena.
Right.
Basically, Batiatus had made this ridiculous bet with his father that his new gladiator, Crixus, was worth X amount of money that he paid for him. And his father was like, no, he wasn't. You prove it then. And so he says, okay, well, why doesn't he fight Octus, your champion? And so he sort of, or actually his father said, okay, well, you put him up again. And anyway, so I get sent into this arena with no hope.
Yeah.
And I take a beating in the script. And then at the last minute, I grab this knife while I'm on my stomach on the ground. I grab this knife and jump up and stab this guy, you know, Octus, and I win my first fight as Crixus. When I played that scene, I wanted to be extremely vulnerable as anybody who would walk into a vicious, threatening, overwhelming alien environment.
Yeah.
And so I had this sort of my mouth. I sort of walked out and was sort of like, and I had my mouth open a lot, and I was kind of in shock and vulnerable and all of these things. And then at the end of the fight, after I'd killed Octus, I kind of let out this primal roar, you know, like almost like I might cry or I might scream. It was like what if I was kind of like I've killed a man and now I've become this, you know, people are yelling my name, and it's like I've survived this moment, and like you know, and I let out this scream. And the director of the actual episode came up to me in the studio and was like, Manu, I got to tell you, that was just such a really great scene. Well done. And I was like, thanks. And then next minute, the producer walked up and he's like, Manu, what the hell were you doing with that? And called it that open mouth fly catching acting. And I was like, what? Like a frog? Like, what does that mean? Like, and in the open mouth fly catching, we're gonna have to shoot that whole scene because, you know, Crixus is meant to be the champion. He's meant to be the champion Gaul.
Yeah.
You know, we're meant to see that once he steps into that arena, the moment that he steps in, we're meant to see his quality. And I chased my producer up into his office, and I said, listen, look, let's have a discussion about this man to man. Can we just stop I just want to tell you where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
And we had this wonderful conversation, and I remember it vividly. And it was really about kind of like, you know, having that open line of communication with somebody and expressing yourself and being rational about it. And he came back and was very, very rational about what he wanted. And I suddenly realized, oh, you wanted that.
Yeah.
And I said, well, if you wanted that champion ending instead of that screaming ending, I tell you why I didn't do it, because John Hannah at the time wasn't on set at the end of that scene. And so he wasn't even in the stadium. I had no one to reference because he had to go off and shoot another part of a scene for Spartacus. I said, why don't you bring John into that scene? And then at the end, I'll point my sword up at him and say, I've done it for you, you know, the artist, you know, I'll, like instead of just doing this primal scream and sort of listening to this crowd and having no reference point, put him up there, and then I'll raise my sword at him and go and look at him like a champion. And you watch that scene. That scene was shot afterwards.
Right.
Also, Gannicus had suggested to me to rid the Hoplomachus of his spear, and that was the only way that I could win the fight.
Right.
Somehow, between the writer of that episode and this episode in the prequel, they forgot to actually follow through with Yoda's advice to use the Force. You know, it's like Luke flying down to the Death Star and he goes, oh, what should I do here? Maybe if I just press this button, it'll go. You know, it's not. You got to use the Force, right? So, and I brought that up. I said, you know, how come in this fight scene there's no ridding of the Hoplomachus of his spear? And Rob went, oh yeah, okay, yeah. Well, hey, okay. So we'll make a comeback. So I mean, in the actual written fight, in that fight, the way that it was written, I got my ass kicked, and there was no comeback in that fight at all.
Yeah.
And I ended up kind of like, you know, just on the ground, grabbing this dagger and jumping up at the last second and winning it by chance. And so we went back and we carefully recrafted the end of the fight scene so that my sword, after he spears me through the shield and it comes really close to my eye. Spartacus fans, go back and watch this. You'll understand. After that moment,
Yeah.
I suddenly realized that I'm this close to death. And so there's a comeback. Now, that wasn't in the first time that we shot this whole sequence.
Right.
That never existed. So the moment I'm like this close to death, I then suddenly push my sword back and go, and it's like, I'm not going to die. And then I bring my sword crashing down on his spear and I rid the Hoplomachus of his spear as Gannicus told me. And the revelation comes about that I'm now going to be a victor because I've rid the Hoplomachus of his spear. And now I'm going to win. And then at the end, I'm going to look up at Batty Artist and say, I am the champion. All of this stuff was shot after the fact, just to make that scene work perfectly. And that's a perfect example of getting together and creatively actually having your voice and being a part with the producer and the director and going and really having this, because that, to me, that fight scene was like, just one of my favorite experiences,
Fantastic.
yeah, ever. And the guy who played Octus was from the Australian Ballet Company,
Right.
real life.
Yeah. Oh,
When
cool.
I worked with him, it was like two seasoned dancers walking around who knew movement.
Yeah.
And if you watch that particular scene for the prowess of physical prowess, that fight scene was physically one of the best pieces of movement choreography, bar none.
Oh, excellent. I'll rewatch that now. To look for that. Cool. Okay. Moving on to Arrow. We've got a couple of little questions for Arrow, and then we'll move on
Did
to.
we really get through Crixus?
Sorry?
Did we really get through Crixus?
No. I'm quite happy to carry on. So I'll go back for Crixus.
What about Andy Whitfield? Whitfield.
Yeah. How
Andy
was
Whitfield,
it?
What a legend. What a legend.
How was it working with him?
What a legend. Oh, he was incredible.
Well time.
So much charisma. He could have been James Bond. He could have gone on with his career to have been a huge star. Huge star. And, he had, Jesse and Indigo, his children. If you ever watched this, your father was amazing. I wish I had been a better friend and a closer person to him. I was too busy being Crixus and playing this force against your father that sometimes I think from an actor's perspective, we never quite got the relationship that we could have had offset. But as we said to each other, as Spartacus and Crixus, we said to each other, in another life, we could have been as brothers. And your father said he knew my song. That's what he said to me. He said to me, he understood my song. And even your mum told me that at your dad's funeral. She said, you know what, Andy knew your song. And I just want you to know, Indigo and Jesse, that your dad was an absolute champion and one of the greatest actors I ever worked with. And he was just beautiful, beautiful soul. And he is a butterfly. Remember what he told you? He is a butterfly. He's there.
Awesome. Thank you. It's great to hear because I say
working with him was just fantastic. When Liam came in, he had a very, very difficult transition to take on that role. He did a wonderful job and was a person of like total integrity. Like Liam got the role because of how pure his heart is.
Yeah.
He didn't quite have a certain like Andy had a quiet ego, and it's good to have an ego as an actor. It gives you a certain charisma that kind of like feeds the screen.
Yeah.
And Andy knew how to turn that mechanism on. Liam had much less experience of screen time than Andy. I think but he became very powerful on the screen. Like I was blown away toward the end of the show. Like I was blown away by how far Liam came, and it was almost like Liam had to start like where Andy started in order to get to his place.
Right.
Have that amount of time on screen to get to his place.
Yeah.
But when he did, it was phenomenal. And to this day, I can't understand why. Sometimes I hear fans say, no, we couldn't watch it after Andy Whitfield. You've got no idea what you've missed out on. And you should go back and revisit the series and watch it all, because Liam's performance, you shouldn't judge it upon the starting day, because he had a lot of weight, and pressure. But what Liam became, especially sort of in the last 4 episodes of our show were the best ever. They were dramatically and with performances. I remember leaning over the table and having this conversation as Crixus breaking away from the Spartacus, the divide, the moment of the divide. And I remember at that moment with Liam was exactly the same. It felt to me like, that feeling of this signal that's going on
Yeah.
was the same as when I did the scene with Andy Whitfield and we shook hands and we said, then tomorrow one of us will die in the arena in episode 13 of the first season. It was a moment of, you can feel it. You can
Yeah.
feel it. There's moments where you just know you've got the hook. You've created this essential emotional level of connection that as two actors, as two people, you've got that signal. And
Yeah.
if you've got it, and the people at home have got it, and
Yeah.
that's the moment of magic.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, there was that battle where you teamed up with Spartacus against Theocles as well, and that had that sort
Yeah.
of magic spark as well, because it was just like you could see that working as well. That was another immense battle. It was just like you can see that emotion, the courage, and just putting it behind the spats that you had and everything, just to sort of let's just kill this guy.
Yeah. And then we both start laughing as though we're and then up got Theocles again.
Yeah.
And it became kind of like our nightmare, definitely. Well, Spartacus' rise to glory, the bringer of rain. It's that moment when it started raining was just fantastic, but yeah, it was incredible to watch, to be a part of all that. It was incredible to be in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who played Theocles actually works as a bouncer at a local club in Auckland, New Zealand.
All right.
He's this big guy, and he was really such an incredible presence when he played Theocles.
Yeah.
We knew we were doing something quite special when we filmed that scene, and that was there was a glimmer of hope from that moment forward that Spartacus and Crixus were going to form a connection,
Mm-hmm.
because I think it was the moment where Crixus was on the ground and he knew that Spartacus was in trouble as well, and he grabbed his helmet and kind of directed the sunlight into Theocles' eyes, for however fantastical that is. Take this bit of glare, demon. But it was such an incredible scene. That was one of the real defining moments of where Spartacus really brought such high quality to television.
It was groundbreaking TV as well. It was just absolutely amazing to watch. Okay, now I think that's all the ones for Crixus I have got now, so we'll move on to Arrow. So apologies for missing that one out. Okay, so Anna XX from Twitter. There's just a couple of people. She's asked, did you research the Deathstroke role? Did you read the comics Green Arrow and Deathstroke comics to research that role?
To be honest, when I did the audition, they didn't even have the name of the character. It's all hidden. A lot of projects these days don't like to even let the actors or the casting people or anybody know who the actor is that they're actually auditioning for. I'll just put out a generic kind of an audition, and then when you arrive, like I did in Vancouver to shoot, they then tell you. I actually didn't find out until I was at the immigration line in Vancouver, having flown from New Zealand, been given the agreement to play this role.
Cool.
I arrived in Vancouver and I was on the phone to my manager, and she was saying you've just been released. Variety magazine has just announced that you've been cast for the series. Look it up. And I looked it up, and she was on the phone, and it was like, it says I'm playing Slade Wilson. That's not the character that I auditioned for.
Mm.
And the guy behind the immigration counter said, Are you playing Slade Wilson, Deathstroke? And I said, and he went, man, that guy's badass, man. He's the badass of the DC comic book. This is the immigration guy.
Awesome.
Vancouver Airport let me know that I was playing Deathstroke, and then I went into the studio and they said, yeah, this is the character you are. And of course I was filming in the next couple of days, but the source material I started to pick up on. A funny story is that I met George Perez, who did the first art cover for Teen Titans. That was the very first figure of Deathstroke to appear in the comics. And he's standing under a tree, and his son has just killed the Teen Titans, presumably,
Mm-hmm.
and he's going like, "I've killed them," and then in the background you see Deathstroke saying, "No, I did," you know, and it's it's funny because I was at this convention and I somebody told me George Perez was there, and I went up and I said, "Hi, Mr. Perez. I'm playing Slade Wilson on the new Arrow series," and he looked at me and he went, "You don't look enough. You don't look you don't look right." And I remember just going like, I'm saying, like really, he was quite blunt about it. And
Okay.
I was quite shocked by it. And at the end of the day, I saw him sort of leaving and getting into a cab. And I went and jumped. So I knew we were both going to the same place. I went and
Yeah.
jumped into the back seat next to him. And I said, "What did you mean by that?" And he said, "Well, Slade Wilson's sort of got grey hair, and he's older than you." And he said,
Right.
"How old are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm 45,
Mm-hmm.
44, I think at the time." And
Yeah.
he went, "Oh, okay. I thought you were like 30 something, you know."
Right.
Well, no, I'm 45. And he go, "Well, I'm okay." And I said, "Damn, they're gonna make my hair more silver and stuff."
Mm.
I think it's also that I wasn't fair. I wasn't fair skinned
Right. Yeah.
because Slade Wilson, is traditionally, a white guy. So thank you to all the brown people out there. We got this, but it's it was a moment of sort of feeling a little bit lacking, and I just said, "Okay, he hasn't got a great view on my visual look for that." But just like Alan on now, like he's
Yeah.
meant to be 6 foot tall, or Azog, I don't, I mean, you got to find the energy for these roles.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the most important thing. If you can get that truth, people will take it on.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I went on and did the show for several months, and then it started airing, and I happened to be at another convention, and Marv Wolfman. I didn't know, but he walked up to the side of my table and he went, "Hey, Manu." He's kind of a quieter character, and he
Yeah.
sort of, "Fantastic, mate, fantastic," and he walked off, and I didn't know who it was, and this guy next to me, he said, "You know that's Marv Wolfman. Now he's the guy that created your character, Deathstroke. He wrote Deathstroke, Slade Wilson." And I jumped over my table and ran over to this guy who was at his own. You're very unassuming, very
Yeah.
unegotistical kind of fellow, Marv. He's very quite diminutive, really. And
Yeah.
and I said, "Marv, I didn't realize. I'm sorry. Thank you so much. I just, you created the character." And I guess I still had what George had said to me, still had me sort of feeling a bit
Yeah.
self-conscious about the role. And I said, "Well, Marv, you like it?" And he
Mm-hmm.
said, "Listen, when I wrote Slade Wilson, I wrote him with these certain characteristics,
Yeah.
and you've got it exactly right."
Awesome.
And to me, that was just it was prophetic. It was like it was fulfillment of a moment. I mean, you can't, like I know that somebody who does the visual side of it will look at
Yeah.
me and judge me on the visual side of it, but somebody who actually wrote the heart and soul of the character and had that all in mind when he created the actual character,
Mm-hmm.
that was an incredible affirmation for me, and thank you, Marv. I really honestly, that gave me like so much more confidence. I'd been a bit lacking since George had, but I realized because he's the visual guy that,
Yeah.
I wasn't quite in the frame of what he imagined the character to be. Um, but yeah, that was a turning point for me. Yeah.
Awesome. That's to get that sort of recognition of from the guy who actually wrote the comic and wrote the character. Yeah, like you just explained, it's got to be such a proud thing to think. Yeah, nice one. It's to sort of boost. Yeah, like it's. Again, I'm rubbish with words at the moment. I've got so apologies. Yeah, but you to actually get affirmation from from people such as that, and chance
It's so
happening, a chance
important.
meeting
Yeah.
at a Comic-Con. Yeah, you're right.
Well,
It's so important to you as a
yeah.
character actor. That kind of.
There's the people end up being these little pivotal mentors in your life. You just
Mm-hmm.
need these moments. You need them.
Yeah.
I think if you play the song of life well enough, you'll find the right notes. Notes will emerge creatively in your mind. So when you write a song, you don't know what the next bar is, but
Yeah.
it'll come to you if you're open to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And then these sorts of things, if you do the right thing, these notes suddenly show up and they're high points. There's a bit of difference, and you go, wow, how did that note come along? But it came along because you kind of like, I believe, if you follow that melody of life, just, a little bit metaphoric there.
Awesome. Is there anything you would have changed in Arrow in the way it was portrayed, or the way the stories went?
That was this big headline that came out that I was opposed to the writer's direction and whatnot. That was kind of an unfortunate headline to come out because it was typical, journalism in terms of creating conflict. I did an interview with an Australian journalist, and we were speaking about my journey on the show, and he said to me, "Listen, what's your perspective on it? Did you feel happy about what happened in season 3, your reemergence for the one episode in the middle of the season, where Thea sort of took me down and had the gun at my head and stuff like that, and I said to him, listen, I don't want to talk about this on record because it's not my place to comment, second guess about the writers, right?
Yeah.
And I said, so off the record, this is what I think. Of course, the next day the headline was, Manu Bennett disagrees with the writers, blah 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 blah. I should never. I thought that when you say off the record to a journalist, that's what it means, but it doesn't mean that. I've learned since, with some, I guess,
which is sad, but
it created a kind of an interesting bubble because in some ways, I felt the mantle of Deathstroke was lowered a little, and I'll openly say that, and because it's out there now, so what we're going to do, excuse my language, but it's kind of like a moment of feeling, in my heart of hearts about the character and the way that I feel about Deathstroke, that in the way that I've read it in the comic books, and that, he has this conflict with Batman and beats Batman and kind of has this sort of indestructible kind of presence about him. But you see, that's it's funny because, why I would go that way is only based upon ego.
Right.
It's kind of like, well, the written material as well. But I should be thankful to the writers about creating vulnerability, because that's where my strengths are as an actor. My strengths actually lie in the fact of not being that undefeated kind of thing. Like Crixus, it wasn't until he wasn't the undefeated Gaul that he even gave a toss about him.
Yeah.
So it's kind of probably a blessing in disguise. I guess my major pain about only appearing in that one episode was it was one episode. And to be honest, I was clinging to the ongoing storyline of Slade Wilson and Deathstroke, wondering where the next arc was going to go and how strong I could come up against, Arrow and play against Stephen Amell and create more wonderful drama, and create all this stuff. A lot of people are talking about, the return of Deathstroke, Slade Wilson in the series, and I guess as long as it stays as this kind of like murky shadow in everybody's mind, the emergence or whatever like that has its potential, and I'm with no doubt that the producers and writers of Arrow have got their own, idea about the story arcs on the show, and I'm an artist, mate. I sit here waiting for the sheet music to come to play it.
Fantastic. It'll be good to have you back on it, sir.
At the end of the day, I don't own the opera house, and I don't, conduct the orchestra, and that's the kind of, that I've got to wait for my cue.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, I'm always very thankful to the fans of Arrow that, a very funny thing, right? Yesterday, and I was thinking about it when I came back here to Hollywood, because I'm in LA right now, promoting Shannara, but I ran into Stephen Amell's wife coming out of Whole Foods, and I hadn't seen her since I hadn't seen her since they'd had their child,
Yeah.
up in Canada, you know, or their baby came along. I think to the Christmas party was the last time I saw them, and they
Yeah.
had their little baby there. And Steve was, you know, becoming not only a, you know, a successful actor, but now a dad. And you know, there's, you know, and there was his wife, and I met them, and you know, I ran into her, like again, like those musical notes that I was talking to you
Yeah.
about. You know, it was like how did, like it was so strange. I saw her walk out of Whole Foods, and I went, and you know, I don't really know her, so I don't even know how I really recognized her. You know,
Right.
last time I saw her, she was still coming out of, you know, being a mum and just having a
Yeah.
baby and all this sort of stuff. And well, you know, she's in this gym outfit. You know, she's obviously way back to her own self and all that sort
Mhm.
of stuff. Because mothering is very, I know because I've got 3 kids and I've seen what my wife goes through. But you know, so out she came looking great, and I was like, "Oh, hey!" And I ran up and I said, "Oh, you," and she's, "Yeah, yeah, Manu," and we had this great conversation. You know, it was like a real life conversation.
Yeah.
You know, and Steve and her, they bought a new home in the Hollywood Hills here, and they're doing fantastically.
Awesome.
And I just said, you know, just you know, say hi to Steve for me, give him my absolute love, and you know, and it was just nice to make that connect again,
Yeah.
even with Steve, even just through that moment. You know, I know that Steve will get the message, and you know, the universe is keeping us connected.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome. That's it's just kind of fate as well, isn't it? Kismet.
absolutely. Like Marv Wolfman or anything, all these little
Exactly. Yeah.
moments are just, you know, they're just the
Just
ways that you know, if you stay open, these connects will happen. Yeah.
oh yeah, definitely. Cool. The next question is from Cameron Miller, who is a 12-year-old son of a friend who he used to work with, and he would like to know how Slade got off the island.
Off the
How
island.
Slade got off the island? That's what he's asked.
Oh, well, didn't well, he must have remembered the scene where I was in the police station, and Oliver asked me that question,
Yeah.
and I swam.
Good as answer, isn't he? Yep.
That's
Sure. There you go, Cam. Cool. Right. Okay, I'll move on to the
it's funny. I didn't swim around in a circle with my eye missing. You know, it would have
Oh
been
yeah,
like
that would have been
in the circle.
a spatial awareness issue. Yeah. Cool. But moving on to the Hobbit and Arzog then.
Hmm.
Obviously that was another huge character for you. Basically, was there a scene? This is from Anna XX again. She sent a couple in. Was there a scene where you think Arzog could have been included in or done more in, if there was any cuts? And could you be that sort of more inclusion in any particular scene or?
Oh, you know what? Peter Jackson was just, you know, he was fantastic. Again, another one of these artists that you can sort of have a conversation with, and
Mhm.
it's not about hierarchy. All of a sudden, all the walls disappear, and it's just total creativity. You know, there was stuff with Arzog where, you know, like I had this really beautiful kind of ability to sort of say something as an actor, you know, and you know, because it's not altogether possible to do that, you know, like you're
Yeah.
paid to go and say lines and do things, but you know, it's 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 how you feel it and how you communicate. And you know, at the end of the day, you know, it's not always easy, and you've got to sort of try to find ways. But I remember, you know, stopping in the middle, because you know these time constraints in these scenarios are very real, you know, and it costs money, and time's ticking. And you know,
Yeah.
there's like, you know, if you go take a toilet break, I think it's like might cost $5,000 of production time.
Whoa.
Honestly, if you stop set and go to the bathroom
Yeah.
for a whiz, it's probably going to cost them $5,000
Good God.
in production time.
Most expensive
Mate,
pee in the
you know.
world. Yeah.
Well, exactly, but yeah, but no, seriously, you know, it's really, there's
Mm.
it's no exaggeration, but you know, so when I was with Peter and we were doing Arzog, you know, I got on top of this green screen pommel horse, this kind of, you know, and you know, I didn't know what a wag looked like,
Yeah.
and you know, I said, Peter, you know, this thing that I'm on. You know, because we're getting ready to film. He said, "Okay, you've got some big trees in front of you, Gandalf." This is from the first movie,
Yeah.
Gandalf and Thorin and all these, you know, hobbits or these dwarves are up this hobbits and dwarves are up this tree,
Hmm.
and you're going to ride down and say, you know, can you smell the fear? Gundinisi, Gundinast, you know, and you know, you're on top of your wag, and the wag's going to move around a bit, and I said, but what this wag, you know, like is it going to be in all the films?
Mm.
And he said, yeah, and I said, well, you know, do I have a relationship with my wag? And and Peter actually stopped and came around the booth, and he said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, you know, like you know, do I have a relationship with it? Like, you know,
Yeah.
like can I refer to my wag? And I said to him, like in this scene, like, it's like I'm standing up with this prowess and saying, like, you know, like in a menacing way, can you smell their fear
Mm.
to the orcs beside me? But can I sort of suppress the drama so we
Mhm.
can build into it, and kind of like come down and stroke the back of, like, I've got my arm cut off, haven't I? So I've got a
Yeah.
pitch on I've got a fork on this hand, and like
Mhm.
where my arm's been cut off. Can I use that fork to scratch the back of my ward's neck
Yeah.
and then whisper the line to the warg? Because if
Mhm.
the warg can smell the fear, then it's going to get fed.
Yeah.
And therefore, I had this intimacy with my warg, and it kind of just shifts the drama away a bit. And
Mhm.
he was really open to it. He said, "Yeah, go ahead and do that." And if you watch it
Awesome.
in the movie, that's exactly what happens. It becomes kind of like this intimate. It's like an orc can be intimate instead
Yeah.
of just coming into every scene and going like, "Rah, I'm an orc," "Rah, rah."
Mhm.
It's like this orc can feel. He's got a connection. He's got a, and
Yeah.
I think it's not until we find out that Darth Vader's Luke's father that all of a sudden we have this cosmic shift in relationships, and I found that with Arzog, every moment that I got that I could somehow make him feel realistically like something that had a range of emotions really helped make him a much more interesting orc,
Awesome.
leading orc. So yeah, there was these little opportunities, but it was kind of very different process doing motion capture, and
Mhm.
especially because my character wasn't me playing the character wasn't included until after the film had been shot.
Right.
The film had originally been shot with a 7-foot actor in a bodysuit, uh, in a full orc kind of idea of a bodysuit,
Yeah.
like. But those masks have very limited, um, kind of when you go in close with the camera. Masks can sometimes just look like masks, and
Yeah.
it's hard to get around that unless you've got a lot of feeling coming from the actor.
Mhm.
Things can be lost, subtle details, and you can just sort of see how much Arzog through motion capture and that
Mhm.
wonderful art that they created over his look, how he breathed and
Yeah.
had, you could see the very, very fine subtleties of the character. So, you know, having to infuse that in all of the performances in relation to the other actors was kind of like a bit of a leap of faith,
Mhm.
because none of them were there, and I had to just sort of like pretend they were there.
Yeah.
And I had, like, other voice artists and stunt guys, and sometimes the female dialogue coach, Leaf. She was standing opposite me,
Mhm.
and I'd talk to her as though she was Bolg or
Yeah.
one of these orcs. So when you have a very strong male character opposite you,
Mhm.
you know how to get into that kind of challenge. But when you have like a female dialogue coach doing that scene, there's a different there. So you have to actually just know where to pitch it from,
Yeah.
and not expect certain responses which you're used to getting. So there was a different way of composing the performance of Arzog, and it was very much like a jigsaw puzzle. But in the end, it was just amazing to end up in a film, premiere, looking up at the big screen and seeing that you're involved in a Peter Jackson project. It was mind blowing. It
Ah,
really is. I
wow.
mean, I still scratch myself and think, like, how did I survive that car accident and get to work with Peter Jackson? You know what I mean? Those
Yeah.
are the little polarization moments, and there's just so many events leading up to something like that. And when you get to that moment and you really do accept it for what it is, you just got to be hugely grateful that, like me as one actor out of so many out there that are vying for these roles and whatnot, I get that opportunity. It's just it's a blessing, mate. It really is. Yeah.
I
You
can
know,
imagine. Yeah, especially with Peter Jackson as well. What you said about the bathroom break actually reminds me. Jed Brophy was on before Christmas. I had a
no,
chat with him, yeah, and, and he mentioned a similar sort of thing because he said Martin Freeman was always joshing with him and messing around, and I think there was a scene where they're all in the water, and Martin Freeman's obviously Jack, and they just turned around to him and goes, "Yeah," he goes, how long have we been in this water? Have you seen any of us going for a bathroom break or peeing in the water? Yeah, yeah. I think that's what he said. It was. They were joking around saying, that's how they got Martin back for playing all these little jokes on him. It's just like, Martin, by the way, how long have you been in this water, and how long have we sat here without going for a bathroom break?
Hey, brother, I don't mean to be rude, but I just got a battery warning. I'm down to 10%.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I don't have a charger out here. Let's go.
Right, okay. I shall move on to the Shannara then, for yourself. This is I watched this last night, by the way. I watched the first 2 episodes and I was absolutely blown away. And I actually totally agree. Collider.com came out with the real standout of the series was Manu Bennett, who imbues Al-Anon with confidence and self-awareness. And I've got to agree. Everyone, all the cast seemed to be such. You fell in with everybody, but you know, I say Al-Anon himself was.
So one thing just straight away about that, I'm given a very strong character, and people tend to magnate towards strength.
Yeah.
Like they somehow people go, oh, that's impressive, like we like we like that character, right? I have to give it to Poppy and Austin and Ivana. They're playing young characters trying to find their way, and I think that somehow my character comes across as overpowering and gets this credit in these early reviews.
Yeah.
Right. But just let it breathe and watch these characters evolve. Austin to me is like one of the brightest young actors that I've gotten to work with. And I don't just say that out of nepotism of the show. I say it out of the guy that I've got to know. He's a wonderful young guy, and he was directed a lot in the first couple of episodes on how to play, his vulnerability and how to play kind of like a touch of humor that the producers and everybody wanted. And everybody's, there's this formulaic mix that's going on in the background that one actor can't control everything. And so Austin's performance cooks beautifully as we go along, and from the outset, like any series, there's a lot of direction going on, trying to find what the right formula is. And I think like Spartacus, Spartacus really started to find its groove by episode 4. We were slammed by the critics after our first episode of Spartacus, slammed. And there's been a mixture with Shannara. We've had some incredible reviews, and we've had a couple from the real, theater critics from New York and people who highbrow, and used to a certain, adult, requirement of drama, who've gone like, well, this is a bit tush for us, but it's not, it's fantasy. And it's got its arc, it's got its story arc, and it's beautiful where this show goes. And its visuals are just, bar none.
They were phenomenal. That was the first thing I noticed. As soon as the opening credits come up, you're just like, whoa.
Everybody's just so used to now going into screens with 3D glasses and watching Avatar and the likes of, and kind of like, we're probably spoiled. We're probably spoiled. So you got to realize, you got to stop and say to yourself, what has Shannara brought to television? And what has brought to television is a whole new standard of visual CGI and beautiful sceneries, and done by the people who I've worked with that made a lot of the guys that I'm working with were the camera crew, the sound guys, the set builders for Spartacus and for The Hobbit and for Lord of the Rings and for Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe. So you can trust these guys are going to bring all of these visual elements that have made blockbusters in the past. Shannara has such high expectations by the audience because I don't know how it got out there, but people said it was the challenge at a Game of Thrones. And I adamantly oppose that perspective, because Game of Thrones is about a lot of death and destruction and characters dying off, and it's very adult, very
it's very intense, very sort of
certain driven drama, whereas this has got that magic that was written for young people, but where it grabs its secondary layer of audience is that it came out 30 years ago. So the adult audience, the 50 million copies sold, the adult audience that read this young are watching this because it's bringing back their youth again. And so we're providing a youthful basis of a drama, but it has tied in some of these more dramatic elements, which of course has put it at a 10 p.m. time slot. Now, like Spartacus, it's mixing great storytelling, but with elements that make it actually forced into a mature audience time slot, because it has got that amount of, if a demon attacks somebody, it really attacks them and you see it. The numbers are coming in now for Shannara, and it's just, it's breaking records in terms of
Awesome.
the numbers of downloads, and whatnot. So, we're all very excited about where it's going. I just know how these series, having worked on a few of them now, how they evolve. I'm really looking forward to the evolution, because right now it's that kind of bantering,
Yeah, it's the infancy,
moment
isn't it?
of
It's like,
so much is going on about it, that you
yeah.
can't really see the series itself in its own right. It's like, who said this, or these people love it and these people are criticizing, or these people are whatever. That always happens at the beginning of a series, and
Yeah.
it's just it's having its own maturation. But the numbers of what speak, and the groundswell of fan support is what governs popularity of TV shows. The audience,
Exactly.
the audience is responding hugely to Shannara now. Yeah.
When we started watching it with Poppy, obviously running that gauntlet, it was just, that was it. She was hooked. She admitted she was trying to pretend she wasn't, but she was. I kept looking over her, and so I judge a series. If it's a good series, she'll be into it, and she was straight into it as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing more of Shannara, definitely on the screens.
Yeah, and they're good-looking kids. They're great-looking kids, and there's been a commentary about that. But look at Twilight or anything. Are you kidding me? There's good-looking kids all over television.
Oh, no.
But
Cool.
like going back to what I said before, it really does come down to the ability to show vulnerability. But these young actors have got it in them, and it's brought out as the series progresses, and their strength is also something that really starts to shine as we get through, like episode 4, which for any series is kind of like the benchmark episode to sort of build the series forward. So yeah. I think episode 3 airs tonight in the USA, and it's going to be interesting to sort of see how it's embraced even more so.
Excellent. Awesome. Well, I'll bring the interview to a close now, because obviously I don't want your battery to die on it.
Thank you. And I just want to say to the fans of Spartacus and of Arrow and of The Hobbit and now of Shannara, I thank you very much for following my work. I just try to do my job as an actor, and I try to make that emotional connection through that little rectangle we call the TV screen or the film screen. So thank you for watching my work. It's always, I like to do these conventions, and I like to get out there and meet as many people as possible through the opportunity, and talk about the processes behind all of these shows and characters. So if I ever get to your town, it'd be great to meet you.
Well, I'll plan it.
I always said on my Twitter, it's incredible how we live on this planet, and we only supposedly get this chance to meet the amount of people in our particular circle or whatever. But I'm privileged through being an actor that I actually meet so many more people because of this trade that I do.
Fantastic.
It's a privilege.
Awesome. I know, personally speaking, I do believe you're coming to Blackpool in England in June, and I'm trying to persuade my wife so I can come up, so I can meet you in person as well. Because it'd be lovely after we've had this chat anyway to come and meet you in person afterwards.
Bring the drum kit.
Yeah, I'll shove it in the boot. All right. Cheers, Manu. I'll sign off for the podcast now. Thank you very much for your time. It's been absolutely awesome.
Thank you.